All right. So Patty, you know what? It's always wonderful to kind of understand the person that you're working with and to also allow other people to understand who you are. And that for me is a great opportunity for me to now interview you, kind of put the shoe on the other horse. I guess I'm the other horse, right? um, but you have done so much in your life, and going back through some of the things that you started with. I wanted to look at your sociology and your broadcast journalism background first, because I think that's possibly where a lot of it started, maybe even before then, because I know you're a coach from early age. So maybe I start there. Let me see if my first question to you is, what got you involved in coaching, and why has it taken you to where you are now?
I really love that question. Of course, I'm going to give you the shortened version. I, as many people who know me well know that I was a top trained athlete, figure skater in Canada, aiming for the Olympic Games, and had spent my entire childhood very disciplined on the ice by 5 o'clock in the morning, skating before school, skating on lunch break, skating after school. Then from grade 7 on, only half days of school and the rest of the time training. So very, very seriously training. I was put into figure skating as a youngster because I had this undiagnosable pain throughout my body. And they thought that if they put me in sport, some kind of athleticism, that it would really help me. I had big feet and long legs, and just like a puppy, they said, let her grow into those legs, and in the meantime, keep her in good shape. Well, I did, but the pain persisted. But nonetheless, I thought I was good to go, so I just did this very rigorous training. And anybody who knows me knows that we came finally to the trials, where we were trying out for the trials to get on the team. And I had one judge who did not like my coach. I had moved from one city to the other to train under one of the top coaches in the world at that time. She wanted me to train under the coach that she preferred. So she placed me second to last, which put me off the trial team by 1/10 of a point. So after a whole long, from 10 until 18, this rigorous training, that was basically the end of my competitive career, because the next Olympics is 4 years away. Everybody was crying, my coach, my mom, my friends, the people who knew me, but I wasn't, because I was thinking, oh, maybe I can stop doing all this workout, because my body was hurting more and more all the time, but we still didn't know what it was. In those days, you as a skater, as a figure skater, you had two choices when you finished competing. You'd either join an ice show or you became a coach. And the ice show, of course, was right out of the question for me, because I needed to get out of the cold arena. I needed to get off that grueling schedule, and I needed to quit being so active. So when I was just about to turn 19, I signed my first 2 coaching contracts. Now, in those days, we didn't have business coaches. In those days, the only coaches were athletic coaches. And yet, I find today that athletic coaching is a really great way to become a coach, because now people are talking about ontological coaching. Well, meaning, coaching the mind, the heart, the body, the soul, the spirit. Well, that's what you do when you're coaching young athletes. I began to coach young kids just like me that wanted to get to the Olympics. And it wasn't just teaching them how to do certain figure skating moves. It was when you work all your life and you get kicked off a team by 1/10 of a point, you build character. This is coaching on a very deep level that my coaches were always able to say in the sport of figure skating. Any of those where it's very subjective, you have to accept the results because it builds character. So I did that for a number of years, but my body was just continuing to get worse and worse. Nobody knew what it was. And finally, I just had to hang up the skates. I couldn't take the cold. I couldn't. If I had fallen one more time, I think that I would maybe never have gotten up, because everybody falls. You can be an Olympic champion 10 times over and still fall. It's skating. So that was I began coaching at that age and coached for a number of years. And then when I lost it, it was a real difficult thing to come back from, because figure skating especially is not just a sport, it's an art. It's an expressive art. It's a way of communicating, because you move your body at 1,000,000 miles an hour on those skinny little blades in the freezing cold, slippery ice, but you express yourself to the music. And it was very difficult, Teresa, to replace that. So I taught English, I taught cooking, I taught dancing, I taught all kinds of things that I knew anything, because I didn't know what else to do except to be a teacher. I had been reading about coaching and teaching since I was 14. I mean, I knew this is what I was going to do. So to make a long story short, the illness continued to progress. And I thought, well, no matter what, it seems I always have this voice. And people had been saying to me all my life, you've got a great voice for radio. And when I was in grade 11, I had a teacher, a good nun, Sister Mary Carmel, and she said to me, if this skating thing doesn't work out, you should always think of a career in communication, because you're a very good writer and a very good speaker. So that, coupled with the fact that I was raised by a single mom who raised 4 kids in poverty, and she didn't want anybody to know that we came from poverty. So every night after dinner, we'd put the dishes in the sink. And then we had elocution lessons. We had what today we would call table topics, where she would give a topic and we had to stand up and speak. There were 5 of us, so we had to speak in limericks. And she would say, by God, no one will know my kids come from the wrong side of the tracks. And I just love it, because she sounded so much from the wrong side of the tracks when she would say it, right? But so as things progressed, and I couldn't find a replacement. And I was teaching writing, I was teaching speaking, I was working with master's and PhD students, to helping them write their theses and dissertations, and then helping them defend. And then everybody kept saying, you've got this great voice. So I finally, in 1990, I was living in Toronto at the time, and I went to the National School of Broadcasting in Toronto, and I enrolled in a program in broadcast journalism. And at that point, we started out doing radio and TV, and then we came to a crux in the program where they wanted us to pick one. And I discovered, lo and behold, that this voice was another artistic expression. It was an art. Television, not so much. You've got lights, you've got makeup, you've got body language, you've got all those things. But radio, you're either in a little tiny studio talking by yourself into the microphone, or you're out in the field as a reporter, off in the corner, trying to find a quiet place to report the story. And you had to learn how to use this voice, because if people, especially in those days, they were driving in their cars, listening to the radio, and if they went to another station while you were on, you'd lose your job. Because even back in those days, they had ways of knowing what their listenership was. And so it became really important to use this voice and to tell your stories in such a way that people would not go to another radio station. So that went on for a long time, and eventually I began coaching again. People say, could you do this? Could you coach me with this? Could you coach me with speaking? And I started using voice. And then the next thing you knew, I got asked to move to New York, and I was working in New York with high-level executives in the business world, global businessmen and women. And I started teaching leadership and international communication and voice. And it just one thing led to another. And here we are all these years later, living in Dubai, teaching people leadership, strategic communication, and voice.
That is amazing, because I sit there and I'm listening to everything that you say, and I know a little bit of it, but every time you bring something else to it, and I go, gosh, what a life you have lived. And would you have ever thought, at age 14, that you would have wound up in the middle of the Middle East, in Dubai right now? What made you, so I'm going to lead on to this, what made you want to actually immigrate and set up business in the Middle East? What drove you to do that?
Well, you couldn't really say that there was so much a plan. I never plan. I call my life stumbling towards enlightenment. I just go wherever I end up going, kind of thing. But a few years back, when I was in New York, I was teaching accent reduction to international speakers of English, and I was very frustrated because they'd be very good in the classroom, but then the next day they'd come and it was as if they hadn't had any classes yet. And I am the kind of person, and I think you know this about me, that when I'm coaching somebody, instructing, training, whatever, I'm not happy if they're not improving. Like, I have my own goal and I'm sure you do too. I am deeply invested in my clients improving. Otherwise, I feel like I'm kind of failing. And I just couldn't get anything to stick. And I didn't know what was going on. And then one day, one of my clients, she was the wife of a very high up executive in the cosmetic world, and she was French. And I had been coaching her for about 3 years, so we kind of became friends. And I gave her for Christmas that year a big, thick anthology of American literature, because I'd never really studied. As a Canadian, I didn't know much about American literature. In university, I had studied Commonwealth literature. So we're going along, she's reading out loud, and one day we come across a story by the great African-American writer Richard Wright, called The Man Who Was Almost a Man, I think. And it was written all in Black dialect. And all of a sudden, little Miss Frenchie over here, she's starting to sound way more American. Well, mister, I guess I'll go now. I'm like, what's happening? I didn't know. So I gave the story to a Russian, to a Chinese, to a Spanish, to all. Same thing kept happening. I thought, what's going on? And the thing is that it was changing. It was changing the way they were speaking. So I'm a little bit of a nerd. I'm a self-educated woman. I went down to NYU and I began to study. They let me in to study in the library. And I discovered that the English language is what's called a beat-driven language, meaning that there's 3 levels of stress. I don't want to get too much into it. Let me say it this way. It's a 3-note language: banana, organize. It's very, very musical. And all languages find its rhythm pattern in the indigenous music of that culture. And the indigenous music of America is jazz. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Well, mister, I guess I'll go now. And I realized you can't learn accent from reading a book. Can't use your eyes. Got to use your ears. So I wrote this entire program called Accentuate the Beat. And I studied for quite a long time, obviously, to put this program together. And then I began teaching it, because I started to go online teaching in 2008, 2009. And I began to get a good clientele in accent reduction. And before you know it, I had clients all the way around the world. And then that led me into online leadership coaching, because I was able to bring what I'd been doing in New York into my business online. So then one of my clients in Saudi Arabia said, you should bring your work to the Middle East. Now, this was 10, 11 years ago. I thought, wow, well, how would I do that? Well, my oldest brother at that point was the CEO of a mining company in Canada. And I told him I want to go to the Middle East. And he said, I'm going to retire now. And I'd like to join you, because he was a blues musician. So he really loved this theory that I had come across. And so we began to make the plans. He set off to Greece. The plan was he was going to live in Greece. I was going to live in Spain, in the south of Spain, and we were going to come in and out of the Middle East. He went off to Greece to start everything going. And while he was there, he got very sick. Very sick. And I was able, with the help of my friend in Saudi Arabia, get him home. And sure enough, didn't he die in my arms 6 weeks later? Completely took me by surprise. And I thought, well, there goes the Middle East thing. And I hummed and hawed, and I'd lost my husband, I'd lost my mom, I'd lost my brother, all in a very short period of time. And so I was a little bit depressed. And I was still, coaching and doing my online business. And then one day I was just turned 65, and a girlfriend of mine said, I'm going to this vision board workshop on the weekend. It's just for women. Why don't you come? I said, because I don't have a vision, boo-hoo. And she said, well, what about your thing in the Middle East? I thought, well, I don't know what compelled me, but I thought, well, let me go. Let me just go. And I got there. My girlfriend had ended up couldn't show up, so I went there. And I'll never forget the young woman giving the program. And this is really an important point. She was saying to the women, now, girls, it's really important to get your vision and your life going, because, by the time you're 50, it's all over. And what? But I didn't say anything. And then, I want to have a baby. I want to meet a boyfriend. And I'm just sitting there quiet because I felt like grandma. Just as we were about to get to the work, I said, put up my hand, and she said yes. And she was a little standoffish. And I said, I just want you to know, I just turned 65, and I'm here because I'm going to be taking my company around the world, starting in the Middle East. And I wondered where that came from. But vision boards are really amazing, because 3 weeks almost to the day later, I had a phone call from somebody in Muscat, Oman, inviting me to come and speak at a convention. And I don't know where all this came from. I said, well, I can't possibly leave my practice and go halfway around the world unless you find me more than one job. So he found me a fair bit of work in Oman, off then from there to Doha, Qatar, and from there on to Kuwait. That was the start. That was in 2018, in the spring. And on my way back home, I stopped in Ireland to see some gals I'd gone to university with in Paris way before my son was born, and my son's in his mid-40s. And I got a message, I heard about you in these 3 countries. Would you come back in September and speak in Dubai? And I said, well, I can't possibly leave my practice here unless you get me more work. So she got me work in Dubai, and again in Bahrain, and again in Oman. And from there, it just started. So I guess and then finally I was on my way to Bahrain almost 4 years ago when the pandemic hit. I was in Oman. We got locked down in Oman. I never did get to Bahrain. I haven't been back to Canada. Because by the time they lifted the ban, the travel ban in Oman, it was 6 months later. Now I had a flat, I had a fridge, I had a bed, I had a desk, I had everything, computers, everything, right? So, and it was winter coming up to Canada. So I stayed, and one thing led to another, 2 years in Oman, and then finally 2 years here. And I've never had a plan, but I sort of have a plan now to stay here for a while because I love it. So that's look at my age, there's no short stories, okay?
No, I love it. I love it. I just let you go because there's just so much that comes out of it. And, I love the fact that a lot of people would have seen some of the things you went through as obstacles or hurdles, but every single obstacle seemed to be there for a reason to help you achieve and get to where you wanted to be. So that leads me like to the next question. Everybody out there, they potentially think they have goals, or they think they have a plan, or maybe they're like you and they don't have a plan. What piece of advice could you give our listeners here about, I don't know, the principles or the strategies that you think is critical for people to actually bring their plan or their objectives to life?
I really love that question. I just had a conversation the other day with a friend about this. The Middle East thing actually started when I was in New York, and a colleague of mine used to go in and out of the Middle East and teach communication. And I remember saying to her, much to her chagrin, because she wasn't really up for it, but if there's any time you can't go, just call me. I'd love to go. And I remember, but I never made a plan from it. But that would be when I planted the seed. Mm-hmm. And as you go along, it's the hardest part, I think, about having a goal and aiming for the goal, is that you cannot be attached to the outcome. You plan, you set a timeline. Sure, you should always set a timeline. But with my plan, when I met this woman in New York, I was like, yeah, one day I'm going to go. So that was the first. And then I forgot about it. But isn't it funny how some things you might forget in your conscious mind, but somehow they hold. And I've learned through studying with Bob Proctor for many years and many, many other great, great teachers about how important it is to set a goal that scares you. No point setting a goal on something that you've already accomplished. Bob used to tell the story of a guy, Bob Proctor, of this young man who bought a Chevy. And he went to Bob and he said, can you help me with my goal? And Bob said, what's your goal? He said, I want to buy a car. And Bob said, what kind of car? And he said, a Chevrolet. And Bob said, oh, okay, well, what kind of car do you have now? And the young man said, I got a Chevrolet. And Bob said, okay, was it new when you bought it? He says, yeah, it was new. So Bob said, this is not a goal. This is a duplication of something you've already done. You should pick a goal where it scares you, but it also makes you get up in the morning. You should have an action plan, because if you don't have an action plan, your goal's never going to be anything but a dream. And then the hard part, and all manifestors, people who do manifestation, the law of vibration, they say, well, it doesn't work. It probably doesn't work because we get attached to the outcome, to the deadline. Well, it should have happened by now. It didn't. So I guess it's not supposed to happen. You know, I learned from the likes of Bob Proctor and Mary Morrissey, when you're setting goals, you just focus on the what, not the how. Mary Morrissey always says, the how is not your business. What? What do you mean it's not my business? How am I going to get to the Middle East? What do I know about the Middle East, right? She's right. The how is not the problem. And this is where so many people get stuck. She said, you just focus, and so did Bob and all of them. You focus every day on what do I want? What do I want? You've got to get emotionally involved in it. And if you ought to write it down in a goal as if you've already achieved it. I'm so happy and grateful now that I am running a very successful international communication company here in Dubai. Now, when I began to write that, I really thought, yeah, right. And I had actually put on a goal that by the end of 2021, I guess it was. And here we are now coming to December in 2021, and it ain't happening. But I read that goal card every day, and I wrote every day, I'm so happy and grateful now that I have a successful company. And you know, on the 31st of December, I moved into my flat here in Dubai. So the object is, it's a fine balancing act. Dream big. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do that. Because people don't know. In 2008, 2009, when I started, I left New York to go back to Canada to take care of my mom. And I wanted to do the work I was doing in New York, in sleepy little Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, the city that always sleeps, from the city that never sleeps. And I said, well, I'm going to do it on Skype. Oh, come on. What executive is going to want to take classes from it? I went to the bank to ask for a startup. They said it was really, sounds like a good idea, but never going to happen. Ta-da, it happened. And then when it came to the pandemic, I was ready. So never let anybody tell you you can't. Do not be discouraged if it doesn't happen on your timeline. One of my favorite writers in Canada is a First Nations man. He passed away now. But he's got this beautiful little book called Embers, and in it, they're just little morning meditations. And one morning he writes, he always talks to an old woman, and it's me. He says, sometimes, old woman, I feel that Great Spirit, when you need Great Spirit the most, Great Spirit's just not listening. An old woman says, well, Great Spirit is always listening. We wish that she would send us bolts of lightning or buckets of cash, but usually she just sends people. You don't know how, but take 3 minutes to reflect on your life. And every time you've wanted to do something, somebody has come, or somebodies has come to help you. Therefore, dream big. Should scare the pants off you, should make you think I can't do it, but I got to do it. How? I don't know. The great creator will send me people, because that's what happens. And don't give up, because I think it's Earl Nightingale or maybe John Asraf. I don't know. There's so many of them. The main reason why people give up in their journey to manifesting is because it doesn't happen on time. It's not our business. It is the great vibration, the law of vibration. That is what we can call God, the universe. I don't care what you call it soccer. It doesn't matter. It's a thing, and it will determine, and doesn't listen to your words. It listens to your feelings. Get scared, get passionate, believe, write like it's already happening, and keep on showing up and taking action, and let the rest fall where it may.
That's fantastic advice. And I've scribbled them all down. I'm sitting there, I'm going, oh my God, I got to write all these things down. And they're brilliant, but it's like plant that seed. Don't worry about the outcome. Set a goal that scares you. We hold back so often, don't we? We don't set a goal that scares us. Focus on the what, manifest the what. Don't worry about the how or the when, and dream big. And that leads me to my next question. So many of us play it small, and there are so many people out there that could do such wonderful things, and they've got such, aspirations within them, but they play small. So, I look at your work that you've done as a thought leader in voice and communication, and also the work that you've done with Procter and Gallagher. So what would you say about people playing it small, and what should we do to help them get out of that rut, I would say?
I'm really lucky because I had a mom who didn't have much, but she used to say, if you want to go to the Olympics, then you just get yourself out of bed. I'll take you to the rink. I'll do whatever you need to do. If you can believe it, then go for it. I was really lucky. She wasn't educated, although she was a smart cookie. Also, the same with my little brother, who was a world-renowned flute player. And kids used to bug us and tease us because, we grew up at a time when you weren't brought up in a single family. My father was an alcoholic. Everybody in the community knew it. And my mom would say, when they tease you, you just say, I'm an artist. You probably don't understand what that involves. And that's what we would say. So very, very lucky. However, it hasn't always been, because it's easier when you're young. Remember when you were little? All little kids. You've got 3 little grandsons. They're all going to go to the moon and beyond. And they're going to do it. And if anybody laughs at them, they'll put their hands on their hips like, what? You think I can't do it? That conviction, unfortunately, that gets taken away from us in school by well-meaning parents and family. Oh, that's so cute, dear, but you're never going to get to Mars. Oh, it's so cute. Johnny thinks he's going to be the first person on Mars. Look at, when I was a kid, people would say, I'm going to go to the moon. Everybody laughed at them. Next thing you know, you got people landing on the moon, walking around on the moon, right? Yeah. So it's really important that we stay in touch with that imagination. Einstein said that the imagination is greater than anything we have. And it's the imagination that creates that vibration. So sit down and imagine if there was nothing in the way. Now, I'm at my age, I can't say, well, I'm going to become the next Olympic downhill ski gold medalist. I mean, obviously did that, but within your passion, within your know if it can happen or not by the way you feel about it. But dream big. And then this is a really big thing. Don't go telling everyone. I have a girlfriend who's got big dreams. She tells them to her kids. Well, you can't do that. How are you going to do that? You don't have any experience doing that. Why don't you just say, well, why do you always have to be like that? She's not getting it done. My own big brother, when I said to him, I'm going to do what I was doing in New York, but I'm going to do it on Skype. He's like, Paddy, you're such an idiot. Then a few years later, he's going to quit. He quits his company to join me. So they mean well, But be very careful who you tell your story to or your dream to, because they want to protect you. They don't want you to make a fool of yourself. They don't want you to burn a bunch of money. They want to help you. So they say,
But
I
do you also find that sometimes the people who we think are on our side actually don't want us to succeed?
envy.
Mm.
Envy is, in the Catholic faith, envy is one of the 7 deadly sins. And yes. And what is it? A wolf in sheep's clothing, right? There's a lot of that. We have, but that's just human life. That's just being, I love the work of James McNeill. I work with him now. I was his student for a long time, and I work with him now. And he and I both have had rather rocky childhoods. And he, like me, believes that what a great gift we were given. The old Chinese say your greatest adversary is your best teacher. Think and take time to be quiet and know who you are, because this is where it all comes down to now. Yeah, gotta love yourself. And if anybody said, Paddy, what do you think is the reason for human beings to be on the planet? I would say to learn to love ourselves, because it's the hardest thing to do. To not allow other people's opinions of how we should or should not live our lives interfere with our heart's desires. It's so easy to give in. I have a very dear friend, and she's actually, I guess, a former friend, because when I told her that I wanted to take my company to the Middle East, and when she saw me coming and going and staying longer, she told me, she said, I can't be your friend anymore. I said, why not? She said, I don't know. She said, you just think you're better than everyone else and you just can't stay in Canada. And I said, I don't think I'm better than anyone. I just got this feeling. I just got this thing. Now, she has tried everything she's tried. She does not follow through. You know why? Because she's got a whole family and all that chorus of people that say, you can't do that. Oh, yeah. So now you're going to do this. Yeah. And it'll end up like everything else you ever did. So she keeps getting certificates. She's very talented in so many things. And she gets this close to it becoming real, and she quits. Now, I know she's not the only one. I know a lot of people like that. And there's been times when I've been like that, but not about something that's in my heart. So we've got to love ourselves. We have to give. And here's another thing, Teresa, you and I have talked about this. Let's get off this, oh, I made a mistake. Oh, I really blew that. No. There are no mistakes. There's just lessons. As a figure skater, on those little tiny blades, on that very slippery, hard ice, you learn by falling. And the first thing we teach when we teach little kids how to skate, 2 things: how to stop and how to fall. To learn from your falling and your failures, those are the lessons. What does anybody learn from success? That money can't buy me everything? Maybe. But think about it. It's that law of opposites almost, that when we fail, when we struggle, when we're challenged, that's what rubs us. That's what develops us. That's what drives us. I don't know anybody who says, well, these are the lessons I've learned from being successful. But I know a lot of people say, these are the lessons I learned from all my so-called failures. The only failure is quitting before it's time.
And I would also add to that, the only failure is by not trying at all. By actually not trying. It's probably the biggest thing that you could do wrong is not to try and fail. Because I mean, you know my story, I know your story, and we've both gone through different levels of failure. But every single time we pick ourselves up and we keep moving forward, because we know we've learned that valuable lesson that takes us to the next level we need to be at. And that's
Go ahead,
just,
sorry.
no, that's just fantastic. And I wanted to I wanted to kind of wrap this up just a little bit, because we could carry on forever and I could talk to you all day long and learn even more and more things. But I want just maybe some final words from you, or a final piece of advice to those out there listening. When it comes to everything that we go through, whether it's in leadership or it's communication or it's in our everyday life, what what would be your piece of advice to women in particular, is where I'm going to go, women in particular who play it small, who don't accept who they are? What would be your piece of advice to them?
We have been conditioned across countries, boundaries, cultures to play it small for centuries. It serves no one. Don't, as Wayne Dyer always said, don't die with the music still in you. I'm not a hugely religious person, but I will use this language. God doesn't make mistakes. Nobody's here by mistake. Les Brown starts every speech by saying, you were born with greatness in you. I actually feel that we are born with greatness in us. We all come with gifts. Every one of us comes with gifts and talents, and they are our birthright. And we are entitled to them, no matter who says what to you. You've got to know who you are, and you've got to embrace these gifts and grow them. Playing small, think about it. Think of all the people that we know, especially women in the former generations, like the ones who played small. We don't really remember them, but we remember the Maya Angelou's. Do you think Maya Angelou played it small? Do you think Eleanor Roosevelt played it small? Nobody liked her. She was homely. Everybody said, they said she was bisexual. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. She said, they're not going to like whatever you do, they're going to criticize you. So you might as well do it. And then we don't know anybody who stayed small because they were small. We are born, as Marianne Williamson says, we are here to make manifest the glory of God within us. So whether you use God, the universe, I don't care. We are born with a purpose. There are no mistakes. Nobody comes down here. Maybe you weren't planning the pregnancy, but that little being decided that they were coming. That's just the way it is. There are no mistakes, and we all come bearing great gifts. And what do we do with gifts? We share them. We give them away. Your playing small will never serve you, your family, your children, your friend, nobody. It won't even serve you. One of the great quotations of Maya Angelou, and I can't remember the beginning of it because I only remember the last part of it, and that is, I dare you to dare. And that's what I want to say to women. I dare you to dare to step into your greatness and to give those beautiful gifts that you have, bring them to the world, give them to your children, to your colleagues. Don't let anybody get you down. You fall down, it's like skating. You fall down, you just get right back up and you keep on going because the music keeps on playing. Just go for it. It's life. It's the only one that we know of. That maybe we have many, I don't know, but there's only one Paddy Kennedy right now. And that, I guess, is my very final. In all of time, from beginning to if there's an end of time, there will only be one Teresa Dukes. There will never in all of eternity be another you. Embrace it, live it, love it, share it, be bold, be brave, be you.
Paddy, thank you so much. Oh my God, I have learned so much from you. And I know that our listeners have as well. And I cannot wait to hear or see some of the comments that come when we publish this. So I appreciate you. I love you to pieces. And, I'm looking forward to even doing more exciting things together. So thank you for being my interviewee today. And being vulnerable with everybody that's here listening.
Thank you for interviewing me, and let's take the beautiful work that's in our hearts to do. Let's take it to the women of the world with our love and our passion and our big, scary dreams that we actually think we can make a change. And I know we can.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.